Welcome to the session of React. From now on, we will deep dive into the world of React. So first, let's start with understanding what is React. And to understand what is React, we will just go ahead and read the definition of React. So the definition of React is pretty much simple. A JavaScript library for building user interfaces. So when I'm saying user interfaces, I'm majorly talking about front end. So basically, React is a JavaScript library for building front-end UI. Now you must be like, that's it? Just a line of definition? Yes, just a line of definition. Needless to say that inside this library, there's a lot that we need to deep dive into, but the concept is really simple. It is a JavaScript library which helps us for building user interfaces. Now, when I talk of JavaScript library, you must have heard this word beforehand in some lecture. So I'll just give you a moment, just pause and think that where did you hear this word JavaScript library beforehand? So I hope you guys were able to make it out. We were talking about jQuery. We saw that jQuery is also a JavaScript library which helps us in getting work done by writing less number of code. How it was helping us? So let's say if we have to manipulate the DOM, let's say I have to first access h1 tag. So I'll do document.query selector, okay, and then I'll select h1. Now here in case of jQuery, we just had to do $, which is a jQuery function, and give the tag, okay. So this complete line of code we don't have to write. So this was the benefit of using jQuery. So just like jQuery, there is a lot of JavaScript library and there is another library called React. Now, just because I have given you the example of jQuery, the obvious question that might be coming in your head is that what is the difference between React and jQuery? So let me tell you, there are a lot of libraries and all the libraries have a certain use case and certain function. So here the use case of jQuery was to reduce the line of code, and basically you have this $, function, and using this $, function, at the end of the day, you are accessing this h1 element. So this is the use case, one of the use cases of jQuery. Similarly, what happens in case of React is that there is a lot of code that is already written for you in React library. You just have to go ahead and understand how React works, and if you have to use React library in your code, how is it that you are going to write the code and include the library in your code basically. So if you have to get the work done using React, what other things you have to do? Now the question is still there that how React is going to help me. We saw how jQuery helped us, how React is going to help me. So we will see how React is going to help you, and it is going to help you in, I'll say, many more ways than you have seen in jQuery. I'll say jQuery, you have seen the magic of using jQuery and you have seen how it helps around, and React is even more magical. We will go ahead and see that. Before that, the question is, where was React developed? So React was developed at Facebook in 2011 by obviously a developer who was working there in Facebook. So from 2011 to 2013, they were majorly using Facebook on the Facebook website, or basically inside Facebook. And in 2013, they made React public for everyone to use. And since then, it has grown a lot. So if you ask me, like, how do you say it has grown a lot, or is it that just Facebook and Instagram is using it, or is there anyone else using it? So you can see that on my screen. You have Facebook, you have Instagram, you have Airbnb, you have Dropbox, we have Netflix. So these are some of the big names. And apart from that, there are many other organizations, many other startups which are using React. So now this brings us to the point that if so many organizations are using and adapting React, which obviously means that there is a need of React developer as well. So if you have to go ahead and tap that opportunity, what is it that you have to do? So for that to happen, I am hoping that you have done HTML, CSS and JavaScript really well. because at the end of the day we will be using HTML, CSS and JavaScript only. It's just that we have to go ahead and use React library, and we will see how it is going to help. The concepts remains, I'll say the fundamental concepts remains as it is. So first of all, make sure that you are really good in the concepts that we have seen so far. You have done the projects. Now going ahead, you have to keep your fundamentals of React really clear. You have to understand everything really nicely, and most importantly, you have to build your projects. You should not build projects just to put that in your resume. Obviously that will be helpful, but you should build projects so that you have the right practice and you have the right knowledge. Many things we get to know only after we have written the code. When we see things in video lectures, it seems pretty obvious, but when we start writing code, we start facing problems, we start having doubts, and we start having experience. This is what you need to do, and needless to say is that you have to focus and concentrate and give time to this particular course and in your practice. Okay, so just focus on building your talent. The job will come running to you. That is something I can definitely tell you. Now let's go ahead. So just now I told you that so many people or so many organizations are adapting React. Why is it so? So some of the, I'll say, features of React I'm going to tell you. Okay, and one of the features of React that is something really useful, and I'll say is used by or I'll say is actually helping in pumping up React, is this particular thing. Okay, now let's go ahead and see what are these features, and as we go ahead we will see other libraries and frameworks also that exist and pretty much provide the functionalities that are provided by React as well. We will see what are the pros and cons of choosing React, because many times if we choose a particular library or framework, we have to know the advantage or disadvantage of using that particular thing. And again, you must be hearing this again and again, library framework. We will see about the difference as well as we go ahead. For now, let's just go ahead and see these features of React one by one. So first of all, React is declarative. When I say declarative, there are two kinds of programming. One is declarative programming and another one is imperative programming. Let me write it down. Imperative. So what is the difference between declarative and imperative? Honestly, this question will not come to you again and again, but just make sure you understand it really well. It will stay in your mind for a very long time. So when I say declarative, we just say what work has to be done. I really don't care that how the work is being done. So for that matter, let's say I go to the restaurant and I say that get me this particular food from the menu. Now I really don't care what the waiter does, how the food is cooked. I'm just bothered that I should get the food, and obviously the food should be tasty. On the other hand, imperative is I call the chef and I say that dude, I want this particular food. Just put this much of this much of salt, this much of masala, this much of vegetables, and just cook in this particular way. So I am specifically telling the chef that these are the things you have to do. I'm really bothered that how my food is being made, and I'm giving the instructions to the chef. Now in case of React, we are going ahead with declarative programming. Now in case of programming, I'll give you an example what is declarative and imperative. So what we have seen till now, let's say I do document dot query selector. Okay, and I say h1, and let's say I do the style dot color and I give it red. Okay, so this is imperative programming. I'm just not saying that make the color of heading as red. I am saying that go ahead and change the color of heading as red. Or what I'll do is that I'll give you a better example. Okay, now let's say what I want is that I want to add one element on our page. Let's say I want to add h1, a heading. So if I have to do that using JavaScript, what I'll do is that I go ahead, I do document dot create element. Okay, and h1. Okay, let's say this is where heading. Okay, excuse the space, the space. This was supposed to be having a space over here. Let's say we have heading. Now I'll say heading dot text content. Let's say I give some text content, main heading. Okay. So now here the JavaScript, or for that matter the browser, don't have to think much. It just have to go ahead and do the execution. So I have written in the code everything that has to be done. Now what will happen in case of React, I'll tell you, is that I'll just go ahead, I'll write a component, I'll make a component. Okay, we'll see how to make the components. Eventually our code will look something like this, return, okay, and we will have h1, and let's say main heading, okay, and I'm closing h1. So you must be wondering like, okay, this is HTML, this is not JavaScript. So this is one of the beauties of React that we have, is that we combine HTML and JavaScript, and that is called JSX. We will talk about it in detail. Okay, for now just understand is that if I have to perform the same operation using React, I'm just going to write a function in which I will return h1 main heading. So in this case, what will happen is that it's not that this code will just go ahead and run on the browser. So it is the task of React to just go ahead and make sure that the h1 element is created, and that particular h1 element is having the text as main heading. But I am not bothered about that particular code. Hence it is declarative. So I'm just, as a coder, I'm just telling that I want to add the heading with text main heading. How that is getting added, how that is happening in JavaScript, that is taken care by React. Okay, so this is one of the things about declarative, that React is declarative. Okay, the second thing is component base. So this is amazing. So for seeing that, I'll have to go to the website of React itself. Let's go there. So now before I go ahead and talk about component, so till now we have seen HTML elements, right? We have seen h1, we have seen paragraph, we have seen button. So now what happens? What is the benefit of having these elements predefined in HTML? So if I go ahead and say that add heading, let's say in my HTML I have written something like this. So by default, this h1 will get some styling, some font size and certain properties by default. And every time I have to use h1 or I have to create a heading, I don't have to write those styling again and again, or apart from styling, other features that it gets. Okay, now similar is the case for p. Okay, is that if I create the element p, I don't have to go ahead and get into the functionalities of p or the code that is written to ensure that the p works in a particular manner. Now what if I tell you is that just like we have elements created here for us by HTML, we can create our own elements. It's just that the elements here will be called components. Now what does that mean? Let me give an example. So if you see, here we have this particular header. Okay, I'm trying to draw a straight line. I'm not sure I'll be able to. Okay, so let's say I have this header over here, and let's say we have 6 pages in the website. So if you will be building using HTML, what will you do? You will have a certain line of code. Okay, and in that certain line of code, you will be using the same line of code or same set of code in all the 6 HTML pages. You will have, let's say, one codes like this. You will be adding this in page p1, page p2, page p3. Again and again you are writing the same lines of code. What if just like you have p element over here, you create a header element, or in this case header component. So now what you will do is that you'll create a header component, and all the code that is required for header component will be there in this header component. And every time you have to add header, you don't have to write the same code again and again. You just have to use this component. And just like you use HTML components, you will go ahead and use header component. We will see how to use that in our code. So if you see, the benefit that we see upfront is that we don't have to write the same code again and again, which obviously makes our code comparatively small. And if the code is small, obviously our site will load much faster and will save a lot of our time as well. Now, when you are actually building a React app, you will just see it from the perspective of components, like which particular components I have to build, and you will be talking in terms of components only. and this makes your code really clean and easy to manage as well. Here inside this header as well, what you can do is that you can keep this particular part also as a component. Okay, now let's say what happens is that this docs tutorial blog community, let's say in some other page the complete header is not there, but this particular part is there. So let's say I call this header menu. Okay, by the way, this will be capital. We will be talking about the coding conventions as well, so this will be capital. So let's say I call it header menu. Now at any place I have to use header menu, I'll just go ahead and use this particular components. Okay, or let's say this is a search component over here. Okay, in this case it is in header. Wheresoever I have to add search, I'll just go ahead and use search component. We will see how to create components and everything, but this is how it is. I don't have to write the same code again and again and again. And one component can actually be used at many places, which eventually means that you are writing reusable code, which we have not done till now. If you see, we might have done it by just using functions, just like we have functions which is helping us, or basically which is, not allowing us to write the same code again and again. We have components over here, and just like we have elements created from beforehand, we can create components and we can use it wheresoever we want. Now in this case, if you see, this is one component, okay, and the same component is being used here and the same component is being used here as well. We just have to change the values, which we can do as well. Let's go even down and see what are the other components we have in the page. So if you see, we have this particular complete thing as one component, and inside that also we will have this as one component and this image as one component. Okay, so now if we see here, we have this as one component and this as another component. Here we are using the same component, which is this component. Here we are using the same component. Okay, so now how to make the components so that it should not be the case that in the same component we are taking too much of code, where we could have divided that component into components as well. Everything we will see as we go ahead, but you have to understand that React is all about having these components. So now let's go ahead and see other features of React that we have. So another feature of React is learn once, write everywhere. So when we talk of React, we have React JS and React Native. So React JS we generally use for web development, and React Native we use for mobile development. So the basic concept of React pretty much remains the same. So even if you are building an Android app, or basically app for an Android phone or for an iOS phone, what is going to happen is that you can build the both using React Native. Now, how is this possible? We will talk when we talk of virtual DOM, which is another very interesting thing about React and something we should definitely go ahead and see, or for that matter, you should see. So we will talk about that as we go ahead. But for now, just try and understand is that if you learn React, whether you learn React JS or you learn React Native, so first of all, there isn't much of difference in switching from one platform to the another. So the learning process becomes really, I'll say, fast, and you can develop apps for different platforms as well. Okay. Now, another thing is single page apps. So React is not the only one which is used for building single page apps. We have Angular, we have Vue, and we have certain other libraries of frameworks as well. Here I'll just tell you what does single page app means. So now what happens is that we have two things. We have single page apps and we have multiple page apps or multi-page apps. So what happens in case of multiple page apps is that, let's say you have 5 different URLs. Okay. So for 5 different URLs, you will have 5 different HTML pages. Okay. That happens in case of multiple page apps. We have 5 different HTML pages. So whenever we hit a particular URL, we will go ahead, we will fetch the another HTML page and we will render that. This happens in case of multiple. But whereas in case of single page apps, we have just one HTML page, and rest of the things are done using JavaScript only. So even if you will go ahead and we will see about React, we will see that there is just one index.html page that we have, and we don't have any other HTML page. And rest of the things are completely controlled by JavaScript. All the navigation is controlled by JavaScript. So this is the meaning of single page apps. Again, as we go ahead, we will see in detail the advantages of single page apps, and as I told you that we will also talk about the difference of library framework and about virtual DOM. So for this particular session, make sure you get some idea of React, what it is and what are its features and specifically components, and make sure you go ahead and you watch other lectures and practice also in the upcoming sessions. Okay.